The U.S. economy poised to slide into recession if Congress does not act. That is the report this morning from the Congressional Budget Office in Washington, D.C. I'm Wendy Bounds. Welcome to WSJ Lunch Break. We're going to go right now to Nell Henderson. She is in Washington, D.C. She's a news editor for us there. Nell, what exactly is the Congressional Budget Office saying that Congress needs to do to avoid going into recession?
Well, the Congressional Budget Office, CBO, is not making any recommendations about what Congress should do, but it's saying, look, if you don't do something, if you don't change the current policies and the current law, these massive tax increases and spending cuts will go into effect at the beginning of next year. And if that occurs, the economy will go into a recession, shrinking at about a 3% annualized rate in the first half of the year, and the unemployment rate will rise to about 9%. So, and if that happens, the budget deficit will shrink, but you'll have a recession on your hands. So it's more of a warning. Look, you guys, you're going to have to deal with this unless you want another recession.
And this is one of two annual budgetary outlooks that the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, typically puts out. Let's walk through exactly what is set to happen at the end of the year. Federal income tax rates, as well as rates that are levied on dividends, capital gains, are set to increase. That's correct, as the Bush-era tax cuts expire. What else is going to happen? It is
a huge combination of tax increases and spending cuts. We call it the fiscal cliff for short here in Washington. You remember when President George W. Bush was president, he lowered tax rates for everyone across the board for a temporary period of time. For about 10 years, it got extended during the recession, and all of that expires at the end of this year. So rates, if nothing changes, would go back to their Clinton-era levels. So that would be a tax increase for everybody. The payroll tax, which was lowered by 2 percentage points during the recession, during the recovery, that would also go up. The alternative minimum tax is something that affects a broader swath of middle-class families than Congress intended. Usually, almost every year, they pass a measure to sort of fix it. That also would go would involve a big tax increase for a lot of people if that doesn't get addressed. That's on the tax side. On the spending side, you remember a year ago, Congress had created this super committee that was supposed to reduce the federal deficit by $1.2 trillion over 10 years. And in order to force themselves to reach agreement, they said, if we don't reach agreement, we're going to have big spending cuts go into effect, half of which will impact defense, the other half will affect other domestic spending programs. And these would be really very severe cuts. The whole point of doing this was to put pressure on Congress to avoid them. Nobody wants these things to happen.
Right.
And if they're going to have to either do something or live with them.
And of course, once you have a tax cut as an American, the minute it goes back to the normal levels, all it does is feel like a tax hike. Let's talk about the likelihood that these cuts will be extended now. I mean, there's considerable divide among the two parties.
Yes, you know, I think nobody in Washington really believes the whole fiscal cliff is going to go into effect. You know, it's sort of like the boy who cried wolf. There's this constant brinksmanship between the two parties that brings you to the, almost to the edge of a government shutdown or a government debt default, and then at the last minute they pull it together. So I think a lot of us expect after the election there will be some sort of agreement, at least on the tax side. Both parties agree that they want to extend the current tax rates for families making up to $250,000 a year. They agree on that. The divide is really that the White House, President Barack Obama, has proposed letting the tax cuts expire, letting tax rates go up for families making over $250,000, and of course the Republicans are against that, saying that they don't want taxes to increase for anybody. And then on the spending cut side, neither the White House nor Congress wants these spending cuts to go into effect, wants all of them, let's say. They both agreed that the defense cuts would be devastating to the Pentagon. There's a lot more disagreement, though, on some of the domestic spending cuts. Some of the Republicans are more in favor of deep cuts to, say, food stamps and other social programs in order to preserve the defense spending. So that's where the divide is going to be there.
We'll see more on that on WSJ.com, and we'll also see more discussion about this $250,000 limit. I mean, that salary, whether that is the moment at which people should have their taxes increased. I mean, there are even many Democrats who don't feel like that number should be pushed higher. We'll continue to look at that.